Now, in my mind, I was like, I have brought him food, right? He will eat the food. I can't sit and start talking to him right now because I'm really hungry. This situation might actually become explosive because I haven't, it's still boiling. And I think, and that's why for the longest time, I struggled to address issues in the moment because I didn't think I had control over how I would speak or how I would respond to you or the other person's response, whoever it was. So for the longest time, my approach to dealing with issues is don't deal with it in the moment. Just take it away, carry it away, think over it, cool down a bit, and then address it later if you ever decide to get round to addressing it. There are certain things I just chose never to address. But yes, I do remember that was one of the big ones. So, that was the time we were in transit, so to speak, to being married.
I think we were engaged at that time.
Yes, we're engaged. Yeah. So you had proposed, we were engaged. And I think we had been going through a couple of things, and I think I was responding in a certain way, which unknown to me at that time was not triggering you, but it was triggering a certain response from you. And it's probably maybe the way that I spoke, maybe something that I did. It feels like such a long time ago. But what I distinctly remember is receiving a phone call from someone that we'd been walking that journey with. And I was driving home that night. I recall I was driving home that night. I don't remember where I was coming from. And it's someone that I really respected. And they were basically, walking with me on this journey unto marriage. So we used to talk a lot about different things. And was someone more mature, someone who'd been married for a long time. It was a mature lady. So that particular time, she calls me up and she didn't mince her words. She didn't mince her words, and she read me the riot act about my behavior. And it was on account of, I think, a discussion that she'd had with her and stuff. And she actually even outlined the incidents. But we had, let me take a step back, we had sort of agreed between the three of us that it would be important for me to walk that journey of preparation with her. So when she called me, I wasn't surprised because she was sort of preparing me for this marriage space, but also in terms of knowing how to respond or deal, but mostly respond with a person like you. I'm not going to define what a person like you is. So when she called, I listened because I respected her, and she outlined a couple of incidents. Of course, I was in my typical standard justification mode in my head. Because I didn't have the courage to now start telling my side of the story. Not that it would be relevant. Actually, I realized it wouldn't be relevant because she was speaking to me on matters of principle, not emotions. That's one of the things that was very interesting about her. She wasn't an emotion person. She was more principle than anything. But I think when I got off the phone with her, I was so embarrassed. I was really embarrassed because here I was, now someone else had been let into our space. And in my mind, I was like, oh my God, she knows how terrible a person I am. That's actually the easiest way I can actually put it. So it was more out of embarrassment. Then that journey took me down a rabbit hole. I'm like, but how could Mwami Chitaka? How could he actually tell her this?
Was it Mwami Chitaka?
No, then it was Felix. Then it was Felix. How could Felix tell her this? He's really embarrassed me and stuff like that. So I was angry. And I don't think I called you that night. I actually don't think I called you. So I let it brew. Because I didn't know how to bring it up. But also because I think subconsciously, I figured if I bring it up, then we will have to address the issues that were raised. Yeah. And I think some of it was a bit of disrespect. Mostly, I think, disrespect. The tone of my voice.
Now you're saying too much. I'm waiting for you to get to the actual scenario.
I'm getting to the scenarios.
Okay.
I'm building the case for the scenarios. I was embarrassed and I was angry. I think it was a combination of those two things. So I drive home and I'm silent about it. I think it's the next day or maybe 2 days later. I don't recall.
Yeah.
But I remember because I had gotten into the practice of preparing dinner for you, like from my place and then bringing it to your place. And sometimes we would eat together. I enjoyed having dinner together and then we'd talk and then I'd just pack up the dishes and head back home. So this particular time, I was really still angry with you and I didn't know how to bring it up. So I had cooked the food. So obviously the food was going to be delivered. I wasn't going to be too angry not to deliver the food. And if I didn't deliver the food, then obviously you would have figured out what to eat. But because I'd gotten into a habit of bringing you food, I was like, if I don't do it, it's going to throw him off balance because we built a pattern. And I know how big you are on patterns. So I go home, pick up the food. Actually, I think it was that very day. Yes, I didn't wait for days. I went home, packed up the food, brought it to your place, served you as I always did, put it on the table because your work table, because you're actually working. And I left. And I didn't say anything. I just put the food there and I walked out of the house. And I think you must have thought I was in the kitchen or something.
Yeah.
I don't know if you had the door closed, the door shut.
I just had the car go out.
Yeah, so I just put the food there, packed my bags, and left without a word. Now in my mind, I was like, I have brought him food, right? He will eat the food. I can't sit and start talking to him right now because I'm really angry. This situation might actually become explosive. Because I haven't, it's still boiling. And I think, and that's why for the longest time, I struggled to address issues in the moment because I didn't think I had control over how I would speak or how I would respond to you or the other person's response, whoever it was. So for the longest time, my approach to dealing with issues is don't deal with it in the moment. Just take it away, carry it away, think over it, cool down a bit, and then address it later if you ever decide to get round to addressing it. There are certain things I just chose never to address. But yes, I do remember that was one of the big ones.
It's quite interesting.
The perspective is different.
But I didn't talk about the part where I hurt you.
Where you hurt me.
Me hurting you was talking to the other person.
Yes, because it made me talking to the other, actually, because I think some of the things I was hearing about them from the other person.
Yeah.
The part I was hearing about from the other person was how you interpreted certain situations.
Yeah.
And in my mind, I was like, why didn't he talk to me first? Because I'm sure I had a justification.
But when you consider the sort of person who brings food and goes, if I spoke to you first, would it have had the better outcomes?
I think it depends.
There's actually an interesting dimension to it.
Okay.
There's a time before we were married, and I shared with you my belief on a certain matter.
Mm-hmm.
And you disagreed so much, you stood up and walked out of my house.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the moment.
Did it have to do with children?
Yes.
Ah, yes. Oh, I remembered. And the disagreement even had nothing to do with us directly.
So, now if you have an image of such a person, is that a sort of person, in case you have something that concerns you, you're going to bring a matter, let's have a chat?
No, not at that time. No, you wouldn't. Once bitten, twice shy
Yes.
is what is said.
And
You'd be hesitant.
you can imagine, and I think that time when you walked away because the conversation was uncomfortable happened before you delivered food and left.
Yeah. Yeah.
And remember, for me, seeing a pattern.
How did you see it? How did you see that pattern?
Someone who just walks away. someone doesn't deal with things, they simply walk away. And I never forget, I think, when you brought the food and left, I remember, I think, going to kneeling on the floor. I'm like, Felix, what am I getting myself into?
Wow, and this is the first time I'm hearing about this.
Yes.
Wow.
Because it's like, how can someone
be so
lack the mind to make peace? How does one lack the mind to make peace? And it's in those moments you're like, and imagine a wedding, you're planning a wedding. Such moments you think, am I making a mistake?
It's a fair enough thought. Question.
Because when you told me you're bringing food, I was like, okay, perfect. She's going to come and we're going to have a conversation and straighten the crooked pieces. So when you went back to the kitchen, I thought like you're going back to the kitchen, maybe to get something.
Yeah.
Next thing I hear is the car going out of the gate. I was like, why is this? What do you think of that perspective? And yet I stayed. I had the conviction that we had been destined to be together. And for me, in that moment, I think I considered the weightiness of my cross.
So you're already alive to it in that moment?
Yes. And now I was wondering, this cross is a bit too heavy.
How much heavier does it get?
And I don't know if it's the day, it's the same day. There's a day I remember because you're staying not far from the neighborhood, but a bit of a distance. And around the time I didn't have a car. And I didn't like to walk in the night because I don't pre-expose myself to security risks. But I was like, you know what? I need to make peace. Let me walk to her house. And perhaps she'll consider the sacrifice of me walking at night. And I remember there was a security guard in the neighborhood. I talked to her like, hey, let's take a walk. And we took a walk to your house. I don't remember if it's a day or it's a different time. And you were still angry.
I also don't remember.
And you're still angry. I don't remember exactly how it played out. And there those
but
moments.
I don't even think you never came inside the house.
You didn't let me into the house.
I actually spoke to you while at the door.
Yes.
I remember something gross like that.
Yes. And in mind, I'm like.
And you had actually come to apologize.
I think to make peace in some shape or form.
I remember that.
Yes.
And I remember thinking to myself after you left, I remember asking you, how did you get here? And you told me you walked.
Yes.
But I think it's later that I was like, oh my goodness, he actually walked all the way from his home to come and make peace. And I didn't even let him in.
So
I had such rotten manners.
When we're getting married, a part of me was, someone asked you, Anie tulisizako bom.
Yeah, I was my dad's friend. No, actually, that wasn't the Kwanjula. He actually said, yeah, tulisizako bom. And I didn't understand what he was saying.
Yes, but I think it's that moment I felt the weightiness of this thing I was going into. And I was like, man. And I think that's why when we're getting married, I was not caught up in the joys of marriage. I was conscious of the cross of marriage.
Which I feel in a way is, in a very interesting way, I feel like getting into marriage with that awareness, weighty and as painful as it is, might be more of an advantage than just walking in with this blissful ignorance of the joys of marriage. And I think I say that from the perspective of risk management.
Yeah.
Because risk management is about being alive to the potential risks and still going ahead and doing a project or doing something, but having some mitigation plans. Knowing...
Waganda said chijomanyi
Chinyaga bitono, yes. And I think a lot of the struggles are on account of the fact that we walk into marriage singing Kumbaya, my Lord, Kumbaya. And we are totally oblivious about what's going to come. Now, of course, there are things that come before marriage that are proper red flags, and you will know beyond reasonable doubt that if I go ahead with this, it's going to end badly.
Yeah.
Or I am ready to carry the weight of it, even if it kills me. And I think making that decision right from the word go is really important, because then you are accountable to yourself because you made the decision. Yeah. It's different from when you walk in and you have no clue and then suddenly you realize how much pride your spouse, your husband or your wife carries. Because when I look back now, it was pride. It was really, really pride that made me feel the way that I felt and act the way that I acted of Answazatia. You know, now she's going to look at me differently.
And yet this is the person God had used to lead us on that path of marriage.
Yes. And not just lead us on the path of marriage, but even up until that point, she was the person who was literally speaking into my life about marriage-related things that I probably would not hear from anyone else. Or even if I had them from someone else, I probably would not pay that much attention.
And she's also the person standing with you
in prayer. Exactly. So she was, in very many respects, an authority in my life. So whatever she spoke was from a good place. But the pride, the wounded pride in me was like, oh my God, she is going to see how terrible I am. Okay, of course, in my head, I didn't think I was terrible. But it was the embarrassment of no korotia, no muddamotia. You know how you responded, how? Who responds to someone like that? You know, how can you behave like that? And she, like I said, she took no prisoners. You know, there's me speaking to someone and I package things. Okay, now really it's the communicator in me. You're thinking about how to package the thing so that it doesn't hurt the other person or so they take it a certain way. No, she gave it to me as it was. And it was difficult for me to take in because yandago wedede wange, for lack of a better word. She literally showed me my nakedness. But she was showing it to me, or God used her to show me my nakedness, not to condemn me, but to help me get better. And I feel like sometimes the conflicts in our marriage, the reason why we even have conflict is because the situation holds up a mirror to your face and you don't like what you see. So now you respond based on what you see, and your anger, my anger, is directed at the one who's holding up the mirror to me, who is yours truly, you. You see what I mean? Now, because I'm not ready to deal with those situations in that moment, I walk away, or at least I used to walk away. Now, unknown to me then is that I hadn't come to that place of appreciation fully of the kind of person that you are. You literally do not let the sun go down on your anger. You take that literally. You have always done that. But I used to be this person. Let me first go, chill out a bit, think
And you
through
stay
it.
in your anger.
Most of the time, I'd actually stay in my anger. And then it's only when I allowed myself to think through things, even before hearing your perspective, that it would sort of calm down. Then I'd probably be ready to talk about it or even to listen to you. It's just that I remember actually, we even got to a place where we would now start measuring the duration, how much time, the time lag between the issue,
Incident and resolution.
incident and resolution. And I remember gradually getting compliments about how the resolution time kept reducing. But looking back now, I'm thankful that it didn't break you because it could have. And I'm not just talking about one incident. That particular thing about me could have broken you in ways that were irreparable. I know that there were a few incidents here and there where my behavior broke you. And there's one particular one. And I remember these words. And even as I think about it, it makes my eyes tear. Where you said, "You have judged me harshly, my friend." And you are on your knees. And there were tears. I actually thought you were being dramatic. Because I think you are one of the hardest guys I knew. And that's when I realized, Rukshana, you have, what's the phrase? This one you can't come out of. You can't redeem yourself. Seeing you in that state, I'm like, wow. This one, there's no forgiveness. There's no coming out of this one. And it had started as a very, very seemingly simple thing. But I think then I really didn't have an understanding of who you are as a person. So it was easy for me to even say certain things that would ordinarily be like jokes. And take them a little further, let them linger a little longer, and not realize that you never responded to things said at the surface level. You were constantly, actually right from the word go, you would always respond or see something from the perspective of the spirit behind it. And that's not something I understood. It's something I came to understand much later in our marriage. And I think that's why a lot of the things that I used to say or do would probably hurt you a certain way. For me, it was just an incident. For you, it was more than the incident. It was the spirit of it or the root of it. Yeah.
Wow. Said so much.
I can't even believe I said that much.
Yeah. And I think those struggles when we're starting into the journey of marriage, it one, I was not planning to get married. But when the revelation from God came, I was like, it is what it is.
Far be it for me not to obey.
But I always knew to align to the path of God.
Yeah.
But I also loved you. And I didn't think anyone else would find anyone to love you the way I do.
Honestly, no. Looking back now.
And in that moment, it was quite a bit of things I was dealing with. I was thinking about being a husband to a lady who was a bit older than I was. And you can imagine some of those responses.
How they come.
How one may imagine it has a bearing to the age difference. I was soon to become a father. Suddenly, without prep. And so it was quite a bit. The time was coming on, and I was supposed to plan a wedding.
In just like almost 3 months.
Yes. I wasn't looking to anyone to see it to the finish line.
Yeah.
So it was quite a bit going on. And when those things happened, it was quite everything that could have forced me to reconsider. But I think in my life, I've done a great job of convincing myself to choose the way of God, even when it doesn't look pleasant. There is safety in the way of God. Regardless of anything else, the fact it's the way of God. And it's interesting, after marriage, the hardest incident that was the one that shocked me out of my slumber. I don't know what I'm saying. I don't know if it's a slumber. But the one that really shook me was you are sending some people money. And I
some
told
project.
you to double what you're sending them. And what did you do?
I responded to you in a certain way that was far from graceful. You tell me I shouted at you. I raised my voice at you. I honestly don't remember. I remember the incident. I just don't remember how many decibels. By how many decibels my voice went higher.
You raised your voice at me, but in a coldness.
In an icy way.
Yes, with a sudden coldness. Yet it was a recommendation. I remember that moment. I think I felt my ego highly bruised. And I don't fight. I love peace, and I'm a peaceful man. Now I could either raise my voice at you. I don't know if we spoke about it. I don't remember the details there. I remember walking out of the house. It was around 8 p.m. I walked out of the house just to clear my head. Just to reconcile myself. And I'm like, what's going on here? Now, in those moments, I didn't know, is it a person's character? Is it spiritual? Is it what? So I was like, how do you deal with this one? And the long story short of what you've said is that the first periods pre and into marriage, they were quite dealing with things, and I felt helpless. And if I was not a man that feared God, it would have broken us in different forms.
That's true.
Yes. And along the way, I think the first reconciliation of conflict was that consciousness of men and women. I grew up with over 4 sisters, over 6 sisters I grew up with. And so the different characters, if you have 6 sisters in the house, they are quite a wide range of people you learn to deal with. But I think when I was growing up, and I may have seen some dynamics around women, I did not stop to consider it's not the individuals, it's women. If I could go back as a younger self, I'd pay attention to women generally and see their behavior and their responses.
I think that one of the things that was very valuable for us, especially in the beginning, was the fact that our approach was different. Imagine if you were not committed to, or inclined to, or bent on resolving issues.
Yeah.
Because they are men whose approach is, let me take a walk, or let me retreat a bit, and then I'll deal with this later. And that's fine. But imagine if you're both those kinds of people, where I don't want to deal with the situation in that moment, you don't want to deal with it in that moment, but guess what? We are in the same space.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the silence comes from. Because if you have unresolved issues,
Yeah.
what exactly are you going to be talking about?
Yeah.
There's nothing to talk about. You can't pretend they don't exist. Because in that moment, I can't speak for you, but in that moment, I know that I'd be going through like so many emotions. Like I would even look at you and I am angry, and I'm even calling you names in my head. That's like the saddest thing, you know? So I feel like it was really valuable that you were very keen on resolving these issues instantly so that they don't fester. But also I think the fact that you were committed to doing that in some shape or form made me alive to the need to also be deliberate. And you can't be the one who is, it's like when you're a child, you have children, and then of the two children, you're the one that they are constantly calling out and dealing with the issues. So you have to recognize that maybe there's something that I'm not getting right, or that is off with me, and then deal with it. And I think one of the ways that I dealt with it is obviously crying. But more often than not, my tears, my crying sessions would end up with me praying and saying, God, please help me change. Please help me change. Please help me change. Because I knew and I recognized that you truly, truly, truly loved me. And had to have loved me so much. Because sometimes I couldn't even live with myself. As in, I think...
You're in that bad.
Let's just put it this way. I think I had a certain level of self-awareness. And I knew the positive things about me. I was also very aware about the negative things about me. I probably did not see them in the magnitude because I needed to contain them lest I feel terrible about myself. But I was very alive to the challenges that I had. I was very alive to the fact that I had a temper, that I was hot-headed. I was alive to the fact that I had such deep-seated pride. I was alive to the fact that I had an arrogance around me, about me, in some shape or form. Yeah, and I really didn't care. I honestly really didn't care. And I was a Christian. But I don't even know if I should call myself a Christian. But I knew I was extremely impatient, as in basically the fruit of the Spirit. It was devoid. It wasn't there in my life. It really wasn't there in my life. But I think I had reconciled it in a certain way and made peace with it. Now, it's very easy to be in that state. And when you find someone that loves you, you take it for granted. But I think God knew that in order for me to deal with this child of mine, first of all, I'm going to have to deal with her in phases and slowly and incrementally. But I need a certain type of husband for her. You get, if you had given up on me, if you had honestly given up on me, I don't know, it would have broken me. It would have shattered me.
I think something interesting that I learned a bit into our marriage was because of my desire for resolution. Whenever he did something, I wanted to let you know. I learned how it made me feel and how it was a bit of. Unfortunately, in those moments, it will now just sort of inflame.
True.
And the reaction was never what I expected. And along the way, I started to develop different mechanisms just for my sanity. The one thing I had to learn was do not comment about everything. Do not comment about everything. Because even if the things you're commenting about are right, that person can start to feel like you're against them.
Like you're finding fault.
Yes.
With everything.
And I think it is the wisdom of loving people and leading them. Because you don't want them to feel unloved.
And the line is very thin.
Yes. So some things you should be able to swallow because that's self-control.
Interesting.
It is self-control to not call out something that begs to be called out.
Yeah.
And I remember learning to separate what is an error and what is a habit. Yes, there are things people will fall short. There are errors we'll make. Just today I was trying to fix the light for this podcast. And I held the wrong place. And it came down. Boom! I thought we had lost it. And that was an error. It was an error. My brain was in a different place. I touched the wrong place thinking I'm holding it. I released. Thank God it wasn't damaged. And people have errors. Now, there are errors that are repeated that can become a pattern. And when you go in Hebrew, there are 3 definitions of sin. There is the first level is talks about missing the mark. It is where you miss the mark. It's not you're not conscious of it. It was an oversight. But in the end, you missed the mark. It's the husband who misses their wedding anniversary. The wife may get hurt, but the man did not really set out to do that.
It wasn't premeditated.
It wasn't premeditated. He didn't go out of his way and say, "Now what, I'll miss it." Or perhaps he forgets the wife's birthday. The wife could get hurt, but the hurt is not justified. Now, there's another level of sin, which is like iniquity, where one has a guilty conscience. You know that there are times as a believer, you can do something you know is wrong.
Many times.
Yes. So now when there are things you do and you clearly know it's wrong. right? So you start to realize that even when people offend us, you cannot allow to put all offense in the same bracket. There's someone who will offend you in error. Now, if someone offends you in error and you don't let it go, you're going to react at their error. And they're going to feel judged very harshly because it was in error. And now they're going to respond, and then you may respond, and what's going to leave you apart is not going to be even what you started with. You're now going to have a bigger problem that was manufactured from a tiny thing that you could have let go of. You see? Now, I had to understand, I talked about it in the book, and thought it's a shock absorber. It's sort of a shock absorber in the car can deal with the funny terrains. Yes, it can deal with terrains that are rough and smoothens them out. And I think when you think about being in a peaceful environment, you need a bit of grace. People will fall short just by nature. Error is too human. Someone can be absent-minded, they forget something, we forget, we act without thinking. And in such moments, we can offend. Now, I learned to not take everything and react to it. Do you have a thought to it?
It makes a lot of sense. There's also something else that I learned from you, which is, I think, closely related to that, vaguely related to that. It was separating, still in line with separating the offense from the person. And so, yes, and it took me a long time to learn that one. So, yes, you have offended me or hurt me or by your actions. And the reason why, for me, many times, the reason why I would actually get hurt is it wouldn't be so much what you have said or what you've done. It is how I decode it. So, you, for example, I'm trying to think of a tangible example. You say something about maybe, and then you say something, but what I hear or what I interpret is different from what you've said. So by the time it lands where I'm at, I'm thinking, this was a very cruel thing to say. And it hurts me because it's a cruel thing to say, as an example. But if I were to remove my emotions from that situation, and I thought logically, the Felix that I know, would he say something deliberately to hurt me? Would he say something to make me feel a certain way to spite me? And the truth is, the answer is no. But guess what? I felt rather spited. So one of the things that you never tired to remind me, not necessarily in that moment, but when we were trying to resolve different situations where I had felt a certain way, maybe where I had felt that what you said was extremely insensitive and this is how I felt, would be, but when you know me, so do you think I actually said that to do X, Y, Z? And I noticed, no, it's just my mind, my insecurities. My insecurities get me to respond or to interpret or to decode something in a certain way. Sometimes it's insecurities, sometimes it's, I'll mostly leave it at actually insecurities. But my and that's the interesting thing about communication or messaging at its most basic level. You're sitting there, you have something that you want to communicate to me. You craft it in your head, that's the message. The channel of communication is verbal. You say it, you speak. it's going to encounter things, noise, in between there. By the time it lands in my head, and I'm decoding what you said, my decoding it is subject to the noise that's in my head and everything else that's going on. So you'll say one thing and I'll hear another. Now, if I respond to what I have heard, not what you actually said, that's where the fireworks is going to be. Now, if I have certain insecurities, if I have unresolved issues that probably have nothing to do with you, by the way, chances are I'm always going to be responding from that place. You understand? So I had to get to that place painfully, and I think I probably figured it out after you reminded me of it so many times, like in year 2. Of go back and think. This thought that you're carrying in your head and you're saying, my husband, Mwami Chitaka, has said this. Do you know him? Is it congruent with his character to just say things to spite you or to hurt you? Examine him away from how you feel. Is that him? Is that the person you know? And the answer was no. And that's when I'd have to come back into myself and say, why am I feeling this way? There has to be a reason why I'm feeling this way. So maybe I need to deal with why I'm feeling this way. And I thought that is valuable. And that's probably been quite helpful in minimizing the situations that we have to deal with.
And I think what's powerful, I've come to believe that the devil exists. And every work worth doing, the devil will fight it. I don't know what the devil is. I don't know if he's like a human being. I don't know whether he's an idea. I don't know what he is. But I know he's a force that antagonizes and breaks and plants discord. He's a negative force, for lack of a better word. And I had to understand in my journey with my wife, I had to pay attention to what the devil may whisper in my mind. I had to pay attention to what the devil may whisper. And I had to pay attention to what the Spirit whispers. I feel the story of Jesus tells us how to deal with marriage. When Jesus was crucified on the cross, he told his Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. That was beyond offense. He was beyond being offended. He was beaten, bruised by the very people he came to save. And at the cross, his parting words, Father, forgive them. But not just forgive them, for they do not know what they do. I had to understand to separate my wife from her weakness and to help her grow out of it. And I had to protect her image from the weakness. You see, there's a Luganda word I've forgotten. Wakusudia, I don't know. It's a place where two people can be having a misunderstanding. And someone goes at the back and starts to assure you how the other person is terrible. And tells you, are you going to just let yourself be disrespected? There's that. People are going to psych you up to do something about it. And I think that's what the devil does. And when you let that happen, and you look at your partner, and this is what's interesting. Our brain associates emotion to things. Yes. Now, when you allow to associate negative emotions with your partner's face, you can set a system in place that's going to bring you to resent your partner. Now, I learned to protect my wife's image in my head. And the way I protect by not saying she's a certain way, she's X, Y, Z.
You don't label her.
I don't label her.
You don't label me.
I deal with the incident.
So you separate the incident from the person.
Yes. Now, the moment you start, and it takes a certain, what you're talking about, is deal with the incident. And I like what you talked about, because some things you're interpreting them with noise. Yes. And also, I think I was helped by the desire to solve the puzzle. I think I love solving problems. And I felt peace in marriage should be solvable. I failed to accept that that's how it ought to be. And that's why the time I realized, I'm like, wait, these fightings are constantly recurring. It doesn't add up. And that's why I got the light bulb. What if it's tied to the time of the month? And you see what's interesting? There's this thing I learned in 2013, came to me as an insight. You cannot have an answer without a question. Only one who's looking for a way to peace will find the revelation. And for as long as you label the person, then you can't even look for a way to make things better.
Because there's no solution to it.
You've already defined it.
The problem is my husband, or the problem is my wife.
But because I was in that journey, I was like, wait a minute. I started asking you, when is that? And a number of times, it was accurate. And I taught myself in that moment to extend an extra measure of grace to you. And that's what's interesting. We have the power to, I think, a strong person cannot be reactive. Many people will do something reactive. I saw a video of two young girls who were fighting. They were in maybe high school. It wasn't in Uganda. And they started to fight. The other fell on a bench and they passed out. And now you can imagine this one waking up to their senses. And they're like, why? What did I just do? And then someone's life can turn just like that.
Yeah.
And all I needed to do is to just not react. Just not react.
I think that's the difference between reacting and responding. Reacting, the person reacting is not even aware they are reacting.
Yeah.
It's as an afterthought that they realize, oh my God, I reacted.
The reaction is not premeditated.
No, it's not.
Yeah, the response is.
It's almost like there's a chemical reaction in their
emotion.
body that just gets them to do something without even thinking about it. But a response allows you time to just sort of step back and assess the situation and then come to it with your full faculties.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's easier said than done.
When you said, I realized every time we had an incident, and interestingly, we were always at home together.
Maybe that's one of the reasons why we had so many
So,
incidents.
usually the most people avoided their wives. Now we were spending almost all our days together. But I think it quickened
Yes, it did.
our growth.
Yes, it did.
And I remember in those moments I would take walks. I'm trying to understand, where is she coming from? Why is she acting the way she's acting? It's like a puzzle I was trying to solve. And I think that is the place of leadership. Leadership should be finding a way. For example, if I come and say, we made vows until death do us part.
Yes.
So I mean it.
Till death.
I need to figure out how we're going to make it work. But I bless the Lord because we've made lots of progress.
Yes, we have.
Yesterday was a good demonstration of the progress we've made. I made a statement. It hurt you. As you're reacting in hurt, I felt now offended or overly judged harshly. But I had the wisdom this time around to not say anymore. I just left. I went back to my desk. And what was interesting, you're on your way out of the house. And you came and asked that we hug on it. And then when you're asking us to hug, your face seemed like it was set for war. But I imagine you are moving against your mental resistance. I think everything in you was resisting and you're pushing yourself. It's like one who has a stroke. That's no offense to people with strokes. But it's like you're trying to do something that your body was resisting. And we hugged on it.
And the part that you do not know is that when we hugged, all the tension I was feeling, it just vanished. It vanished. And I think one of the reasons why I was also led to do that is because I'd seen it happen a number of times where we would have gotten into a catif of some sort.
Yeah.
And then I think actually the most recent time was about 2 weeks ago when we were prepping to shoot the podcast, right in this very space. We came from home, we were fine, no problems at all. And then we're setting up, and then you ask me a question. I don't remember what it was. Or you asked me something, and I just suddenly felt myself tense up, like in anger. So I'm sitting here, we start praying. I think you were doing your usual pacing while praying. And then you come close to me and then you open your arms for me to come on. And actually, the incident, whatever it was, then you ask me, are you sure you're fine? And I say, yes, I'm fine. And I am not fine because I'm still angry. In my mind, I'm like, by the time we start the podcast, I'll be okay. I'll have found my bearings. So the fact that mid-prayer, you just stopped and extended your hand, and I got out of my chair and I hugged you. And I think it was probably the first time that I was conscious to the fact that something left me. That's the best way I can describe it. Whatever it was that had caused such tension in me and anger, it's like the moment I entered your embrace, it just left. So I was like, wow. And I know we'd had done that hug thing before. Sometimes we'd hug, and yes, I'd hug you, but I'd want to keep back a little bit. It's not going to be that easy. But this time, so because of the nature of the situation that we had yesterday, and because I knew I was in a very interesting place, and my reaction was really exactly that, a reaction. And I'd gone through the motions of, your husband. He's well-intentioned, he didn't say that from that place. Yes, it may have come off as a little bit insensitive, but try and understand. You're not... Yeah, so when I was leaving, I was like, there's no I'm going to leave this house like this. And normally you're the one who's asking for the hugs to make peace. Yeah. So I won't say something told me. The spirit led me to, go and ask for a hug. And I felt lighter and better, and it freed me up to go run my errands.
Yeah.
And I came back home and we were good. Because I don't like it when there's tension. I really don't. Even when I'm the one who has started it, I really don't. Why are you giving me like an eye? I really don't. I don't enjoy it. I really don't enjoy it.
We can address something that's vital. What do you think about emotions and women?
I feel like emotions are a double-edged sword.
Okay.
Depending on how they are handled. If you let them get out of control, and that also implies that they can actually be controlled, that's when they become a problem.
Yeah.
That's when they really become a problem. Emotions is what allows us to feel and relate and feel people's pain.
Yeah.
It's what allows us to be empathetic. It's what allows me to... I can have a conversation with, not necessarily you, it normally happens with other people, which is actually quite interesting. And even when they haven't said anything, whether it's on the phone or not, I can actually tell this person is in a bad place. It's the emotions. It's that part of me that allows me to feel things. And therefore, when I feel these things, when I feel what someone is going through, then I'm able to actually reach out. Then I'm able to engage with them from a place of, I understand how you feel about your situation. It's what allows us to care for people. It's what allows us to be good nurturers. So emotions in and of themselves are good.
Yeah.
And God gave them to us for a reason.
Yeah.
The challenge is when they are not in control. When we let them override. It's like, I won't try to talk about overriding a system, but when we let them override, that's where the problem is. The emotions is what allows me to be very sweet in one moment and extremely cruel in another. The opposites.
It's like the sensitivity. I'll give it to you. You see, there are things that are buried below the surface. For the one who is sensitive, they can pick up on that thing that is buried.
Exactly.
So which means they multiply the things so that they can hear them. They have an amplifier. Now, what about now things that are already on the surface? They could amplify them so much
That they'll blow up.
that they'll blow up.
They'll blow the speaker up.
Thank you. And I liked what you used about the double-edged sword. And the things at the heart of conflict in marriage is a double-edged sword, realizing the tool that is beneficial and the tool that's beneficial that also has a side effect. Because perhaps because of that emotional nature, is why you take care of me. Make sure the food is on the table. You actually bring me food in bed every evening.
Even when I'm tired.
And sometimes I'm sleeping.
Yeah, and then waking you up is a problem, and then I want to yank you up. Dude, I need to sleep.
Yes. And you do it every day.
Yeah.
Right? I don't think I'll do it every day, man. I'll find a way to solve it. Let's solve this problem.
Is there a way we can solve this problem without me doing it every
okay.
day? And I enjoy it. I actually enjoy it.
So perhaps it's that positive side of emotion that leads you. What's interesting is seeing the other dimension to a man is the someone so emotional, they may struggle to deal and operate in hard situations. So it's very possible that a man has to have his emotions tuned down a bit for him to be able to operate.
True, I think.
So men are not so sensitive. I showed you the other video of this wife that asked her husband how the friend he was golfing with was. And it's like, I don't know. And she can't believe that he was with this guy
for a whole day.
Yes.
And he didn't know how the person was, how their marriage is.
And you've asked me
I've asked you,
something
like,
similar.
so you just spoke to the guy for 2 hours and you don't know how he is?
Yes,
you don't know how
because
his family is?
I'm not trying to dig into... Actually, I think one of the things that concerns me about people is sort of their spiritual state. I don't get concerned about people's
Emotional states
emotional
and any other thing that's seemingly
It's a spiritual. When I see someone maybe is losing hope or faith, because there I can minister to them. But perhaps men have learned for them they're designed to have a bit that tuned down. Now, when a man in his element does something and the woman gets disturbed, that is insensitive. Like for most men, very likely they'll forget their anniversaries, even your birthday.
Thank God that's not an issue with us.
I know.
It's very deliberate. Our wedding day is our anniversary is your birthday, or at least a day after your birthday.
Day after my birthday.
And my birthday is close to our introductory date. So you have no reason to forget.
So, but the man does not forget because it doesn't matter. He's attuned differently. And I think that place where you realize that, but also, just because we are tuned differently, it doesn't mean we can't be conscious to help out with the side effects. Yes. To try to deal with the side effects that come with our natures.
Yeah.
For example, when I came and gave you a hug last time, me realizing, you know what? She's into certain zone, I can't. No amount of...
Anything I say here
Yes.
shall
So I was
escalate.
like, you know what? Bring it in.
And it just melts away instantly. I can't even explain it.
Now, that's not natural to me as a man, but it's something, an element of me I try to cultivate. And I think even a woman can cultivate certain things where what is positive about her that is a double-edged sword, the other side, to be a bit blunt, is to not cut so much. And that's what makes marriage interesting. That the certain conflicts are going to happen simply because of the differences. But the problem, if you don't understand the difference and you label the person, then you've cut off any knowledge. Yes.
And speaking of differences, I think that sometimes it goes deeper than just the fundamental differences between men and women.
Yeah.
They are differences on account of my background,
Yeah.
on account of how I was raised, family I came from, my environment. There are differences on account of my past, some traumatic incidents that could have happened, past relationships. There are differences on account of so many things. And I feel like that's why it might be, and I say this very carefully and lightly because it can also be a double-edged sword. That's why it's important to be very open with each other. Because there are experiences that we go through in life that shape our perspectives, that change the way we look at things. And now something happens and it triggers. There are triggers to some unresolved issues that have nothing to do with your dear wife or your dear husband. But guess what? You don't know these things. You don't know the ghosts of past years that someone is dealing with. Because maybe even for them, they buried them so deep down in there, they don't talk about these things, that you will never. And all you see is your partner responding, not even responding, reacting a certain way. And you don't know why you're triggering them or even how you're triggering them. Yeah? And I feel that's why it's really important to be friends, but also friends that talk and have conversations about everything, difficult as it may be, because that's where your healing comes from. I know that men deal with trauma in whichever shape or form it comes differently from women. But I feel like, generally speaking, maybe it's because women speak more about their trauma. It almost feels like women have more trauma to deal with than men. You know what I mean? But I think men also do have to deal with things like that. But if you are in a marriage, and I think that's why it all goes back to even the person that you get married to. Because even as we're saying all these things, and they seem to sound easy, there's someone there are people, there's a couple who, for them, their marriage is not that safe space. And it doesn't matter what they do. It will never be that safe space. And some of these things are only possible if your marriage is a safe space. Safe enough, the reason why, for example, we're able to talk about, there was that particular night that escalated into, we talked until 5 a.m. We literally talked through the night until 5 a.m. Like, okay, now we need to sleep. And we're just talking. But the reason why we're able to talk about the things that we talked about, which were very, very deep things, was because it's a space that I felt I can actually talk about this. And you felt I can actually talk about this and not feel judged. So it's that safety. And if you don't have that in your marriage, it's a very painful place to be, because guess what? You're going to be married a very long time if that's the way you have chosen to go.